A top female assassin sets up her sniper rifle and targets the presidential candidate, but the highly intelligent candidate recognizes the killer's position by the mere reflection of the light. He immediately calculates the trajectory of the incoming bullet in his brain. When the assassin pulls the trigger, he lets the bullet graze his shoulder when he could have dodged it, because he could get more votes if he was injured. It turns out that the candidate has such a high IQ thanks to this transparent pill. The human brain is only 20% developed, but this pill makes it 100%. A few weeks ago, Mike was a down and out writer, struggling to pay his rent, until he met a cousin he hadn't seen in years. He introduced him to a new drug. Cousin said it was a secret project the company was working on, and he was going to sell it for $1,000 a pill. Mike was skeptical, but he swallowed the pill. But before he could feel the effects of the pill, he was confronted by a landlord who came to collect his rent. He came up and verbally assaulted him. While Mike was struggling to get out of the situation, he suddenly felt his brain change. The world in front of him became clearer. He could see the lines on the landlord's face, every hair on his head. When he saw the books in the landlord's bag, he immediately realized the reason for his irritability just by the corner of the book. Mike recognized it as something he'd read 12 years ago. All the knowledge he had learned and forgotten came back to him. At this moment, not only has his IQ increased by dozens of times, emotional intelligence is also rising rapidly. After a few moments, he made the landlord smile. Mike was also in a good mood. He finished the paper for the landlord in just 30 minutes. He felt like the smartest man in the world. Originally, he couldn't write a single word of the novel, but now it was just a matter of time. Inspiration was pouring out of him like a fountain. He was frantically tapping away on the keyboard without a pause. In just a few hours, Mike had exceeded his 5-week workload. He couldn't wait to submit his work. It took his boss about 40 pages to get his head around it. He asked Mike to finish the rest. At that moment, he felt so happy. He felt like he was on his way to the top of the ladder, but reality soon poured cold water on him. Once the drug expired, Mike became just like an ordinary man. It was as if a god had been brought down to earth. The difference made him feel terrible. Mike remembered the card his cousin gave him that day, so he followed the address to his home. But strangely, the door was unlocked. He entered the living room. He found his cousin sitting on the couch with blood all over his face. Apparently, there had been a murder not long ago. Mike was so shocked, he sat on the floor. He grabbed his weapon to deal with any possible danger. He mustered up the courage to yell. There was no response from the room. It seemed the killer had left the scene. He pulled out his cell phone to call the police, but then it occurred to Mike. The murderer might be here for the pills. He immediately calmed down. Fear was replaced by greed. He immediately searched the room, but he searched every corner, but he couldn't find the pills. Maybe the killer had already taken the pills. He sat down on the sofa and sighed in disappointment. But just then, Mike saw the dishwasher in front of him. Why would his cousin, who never cooked, have such a thing in his house? He quickly rushed up to check it out. After a meticulous search, he found an entire bag of pills. Mike was filled with excitement. He'd forgotten all about the murder. When he got home, he couldn't wait to take a pill. The feeling of being able to do anything was mesmerizing. He finished all the remaining chapters of the novel in no time. His boss was amazed. Then he used the money he earned to buy tons of financial books. Mike decided to enter the world of finance. One day, he might become the new stockbroker. With the help of super pills, in just a few hours, he had all the knowledge in his brain. When it came to the real world, he put his entire fortune into it, and then he used his brain to analyze the stock market at high speed. In the end, Mike managed to make $2,000. He decided to go big, so the next day he borrowed $100,000 from a loan shark. Then he began to study the stock market day and night. Under his intense calculation and analysis, he earned more and more money every day. In just 1 week, he gained $1 million. He became the star of the stock exchange. Even his bosses were shocked by his ability. Soon Mike's exploits were widely reported. It also caught the attention of the current stockbroker. He wanted to meet this amazing young man in person. And so, with the introduction of the bigwigs, they finally met in front of the financial tycoon. Mike talked to the financial mogul without a trace of nervousness. When the stockbroker asked about the secret of his success, Mike said it was because he studied the rumors. He believes that stock price movements are not about the company's operations. It's in the public's mind. As long as you know what the public expects from stocks, you can predict the direction of the stock market. But it takes a lot of talent to be able to do that. David was amazed at what he heard. This is indeed a special method. He was so impressed that he asked Mike to come and work for him. Mike, of course, would not refuse. He even fantasized about the day day he became president. As long as he keeps working hard, he would be on top of the world one day. But just at this moment, Mike suddenly felt that his body seemed to be abnormal. When he turned his head, he realized that there were shadows behind him in the mirror. When he came to his senses, he walked into a bar. He didn't know why he was here. It was as if his body no longer belonged to him. Mike subconsciously danced to the music, but when he turned his head, he was on the bridge. As he pondered the situation, he suddenly began to vomit like crazy. The effect of the pills stopped at that moment. Mike tried to remember what had just happened, but he couldn't remember how he got here. It was as if his life had become a blank memory. He returned home in a state of shock. After calming down, Mike remembered that his cousin said the drug had side effects, so he took out his cousin's client book. He dialed the numbers in it one by one, trying to find out if the person had a similar condition. But strangely, all the people he contacted had died. Mike was getting scared. He was just on his way to success. How could he die like this? In desperation, he called the last number. To his surprise, he was still alive. But every day was worse than death. Mike breathed a brief sigh of relief. He arranged to meet her at a nearby restaurant. The woman's face was haggard and pale. She looked like she'd just crawled out of a coffin. Before Mike could say anything, the woman warned him to stop taking the pills immediately. Although this pill can activate the brain 100%, but at the same time, it can also greatly deplete the brain's lifespan. If you take too much of it, you'll start to get all kinds of strange diseases. No matter what medication you take, it won't help. This kind of pain will stay with you until you die. The woman survived only because she stopped taking the pills in time, but she was left with a lot of after effects. At one point, she wanted to kill herself, but she didn't have the courage. Mike didn't say anything for a long time. He was already on this path. All his achievements so far were due to the pills. He could never have gotten this far on his own. Mike wasn't going to stop taking the pills, but he had to find a solution, so he spent a lot of money on a lab. He assembled an elite team to study the drug's ingredients and find ways to improve it to get the team to work harder. Mike promised them $1 million, that each of them would get $1 million. By now, Mike had joined David's team. Making money was a piece of cake for him under the intense daily work. Mike quickly learned all of the stock god's business tactics. His ability was on par with the god of stocks. The only thing he lacked was experience, so Mike decided to quit his job. He was going to start his own company, using the skills he learned from David. Mike quickly made the company bigger and stronger. He even became David's competitor, but this soon aroused David's dissatisfaction. We were mentors and disciples back in the day, but now you're always against me. With this resentment, David visited Mike at home. He threatened him to close the company immediately. Then David said, "What if you run out of pills?" So he came prepared. He knew that Mike had been taking the pills, and he had someone shut down Mike's lab. David threatened him that if he didn't shut down the company, he'd never get his hands on the super pills again. He was very confident, because he knew that without the drug, Mike was just an ordinary man. But the strange thing was that Mike didn't look the slightest bit different after hearing that, and said something that made him sweat. "A truck behind you is going to hit a car." Mike and analyzed the detailed reasons. David's mind went blank at the sight. He was about to say something. Mike suddenly put his hand on his heart. He just touched it. He knew David had dilated heart disease. The only reason he's still alive is because of his artificial heart. David was silent. His face became very ugly. Mike told him that if he hadn't quit his job back then, their identities would have changed. David was the one who gave him a hand. A series of words left David speechless. He took a deep breath and got in his car to leave. David knew he had lost the game. Mike had been prepared for this. David did shut down his institute, but only one of them, and the super pill had been modified a long time ago. He no longer relies on the pills, because his brain is always in a state of 100% development. Becoming the next stockbroker is no longer his ultimate goal. His next step is to run for president and take control of the country.